Thank you. Yeah, okay. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to our session this evening with Dewi Lewis. So we were lucky enough some years ago to hear from Dewi. It's great to have him back. Dewi's been publishing books for quite some time, since the mid-90s. I'm sure many of you, if you're collecting books, have probably got one or two in your collection. There's lots of fabulous photographers that choose to work with Dewi. So he's obviously doing something very right. And it's great to have him tell us about his work tonight. So, as usual, if you want to ask questions, you can pop them into the chat. Um, if it's sort of pertinent at the time that you ask the question that we get an answer, it might be a good idea to put your hand up in the using the tools in Zoom to do that. But otherwise, we'll ask questions in little groups when Dewi takes a breath. Grand. Please take it away.
Perfect. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dewi, Dewi Lewis, and tonight I'm going to tell you a bit about my publishing house, but also about the process of trying to get a book published. So I began publishing in 1987, a very, very long time ago now. I was director of an art centre in Manchester, Corner House, which was film and visual arts. We had three galleries, three cinemas, bar, cafe, education facilities, bookshop. So it was quite a big operation. And it became clear to me really about 85, late 85, early 86, that for photographers, um, books were probably more important than exhibitions. And through the photographers I was speaking with, um, it became obvious that there weren't enough publishers working in the UK or even worldwide. And so I did some research and then launched um, our first book. I then got more and more involved in publishing, and ended up, because I was also director of the art centre. Um, I had a full-time job, and the publishing was adding extra layers to that work, working evenings, weekends, etc., to try and deal with that side of things. And so I went independent in 1994. And over the time I've been publishing, we've done about 500 books. They're distributed worldwide, and we published both established and emerging photographers. So this is the very first book that I published back in 1987, John Davis, A Green and Pleasant Land. And then at Corner House, these are some of the publishers that I worked with. So it's when I started working with Martin Parr. We worked with Elliot Erwitt on his first Dogs book, Paul Graham initially on Troubled Land, then New Europe, and a couple of other titles. Robert Frank, in the sense that we brought the Americans back into the UK. It had been out of print in the UK for some time. Tom Wood, Nan Goldin, Leonard Freed. So it was quite a mix of people. And what's interesting is that in those days, of course, we didn't have internet, we didn't have email, and therefore contact with photographers was considerably more difficult than it is now. And several of the photographers that I actually published, I had correspondence with, but I had phone calls with them, but I never actually met them. So I never met Robert Frank. I never met Leonard Freed. And there's a few like that. And the situation is clearly very different now. So in June 94, I left to set up my own imprint. And these are some examples of recent titles. This first one, Near Dark, by Chris Dawley Brown. And this is, they're all photographs taken in London between 2009 and 2025. And they're either in late afternoon, early dusk, or early morning. So here are just a few examples for you to see. It's very atmospheric work. And I mean, I fell in love with it straight away when I saw the work. Very still. Now, this next book is Moon City by Mimi Molliker. And Mimi is a photographer, but he's also involved in, he teaches, he's also involved in something called Photo Meet, which is portfolio sessions, which happen in London. I think they're scheduled for May the 7th, 8th, certainly May this year is the next one. Very well worthwhile looking at. And this project came about from Mimi during lockdown, uh, using it. He was always interested in the stars in astronomy and had his own telescope. But he then decided to try using his mobile phone and the telescope. And he wanted to get a sense of London, which is where he's based, and the sense of a city and the backdrop of the moon. Now, this book is Unyielding Floods by a photographer called Peter Caton. And Peter, he's not so well known in the UK, and that's mainly because for more than well over 10 years, he's been working out of the UK, primarily in Africa and India. And although he has exhibited quite widely in places like the Royal Festival Hall, etc., um, he's not been able to network in the way that many photographers do. And this is about the extraordinary floods in the Sudan, which have gone on for uh, over 6 years now, displacing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people and making it impossible for people to live in large areas of the country. This book, Kiogoro, is by a Japanese photographer, Makiko, who's based in the UK. And this is about the Japanese experience in America, um, primarily after the Second World War, when many of the Japanese were um, interned in camps across the states. And this book, Kahila, is by a Muslim photographer. Just let me get some information there. Yeah, sorry, it's a Muslim photographer, Nudrat Avsa, and Nudrat is based in Bradford, and she became very interested in some of the Jewish synagogue that was in Bradford, particularly an old one, which had a long history. And she talked with members of the Jewish community and was able to get access to photograph the experience of um, being within that synagogue. The difficulty for Nudrat with all this work, though, was that she had to work with available light. So it obviously quite a difficult situation to work within. And then let's have a look at this one. Field trips, Beres Connolly. Now we've done, this is the third book we've done with Beres. We did one on his photographs in Hackney, one on his photographs in Sheffield. And this is much looser in the sense that it's work that he's created across the UK, some in Wales, some in Scotland as well as England, and they're very beautiful. But they're also quite fascinating in the way that Beres is very concerned about midtones. He's avoiding harsh contrasts, etc. And they are, again, very atmospheric, interesting images. And of course, you can't have one with image of England without cows in a field. So let's move on to something that everyone asks me, how to publish a book. Um, Back in 1994, I actually wrote a book called Publishing Photography, long out of print now. And that was written by me after 7 years of publishing. And it was written because, to be honest, I was just fed up of having phone calls from photographers who would say, how do I publish a book? And whilst I wanted to help and be as helpful as I could be, when you have 5 or 6 photographers phoning you every day, asking that same question, it becomes a bit much. So I'll try and expand a bit on this just to give you a sense. And for me, the important questions are really why, what, and how. So, why do you want to publish a book? Now, so many photographers have said to me they want to publish a book because everyone tells them they should. And the people who tell them are usually friends, family, etc. They're, yes, it's nice to have a book, but you're going out into a world where there are so many books already, and you've got to see why yours is going to have any impact, why it's going to be important to people. What are your real motives behind doing it? Is it a sense of vanity? Is it a sense that you feel that everyone else is doing a book? There are many sorts of reasons, but I think you have to be as honest as possible, and you have to say, well, um, if I do a book, I'm doing it because I seriously believe there is an audience out there. And you always have to think about the audience. So you decide you want to do a book. What? We'll come on to that in a second. And how? How are you going to move it forward? So I suppose one of the first questions is, what sort of book do you want to make? Um, you could do an ebook, and ebooks for me are not that satisfying, but you can with an ebook do more than just I suppose you could see a PDF available on screen as an ebook. But by ebooks, I mean something in which you can have links from the pages of the ebook itself to other sources of information. And that's certainly very possible to do when you look at it seriously. The problem for ebooks, for me, is that I've not really seen any proof that they work in the sense of getting to a broad audience. And so I've been very hesitant about them. MacBooks, for example, probably 10 years ago now, started to do a series of ebooks. They really struggled to get them out there and more or less went back to just doing printed books. So the second category would be digitally printed books, blurb, etc. Um, they're fine. They have limits in that the formats are limited. The quality is good, can be very good, but they still feel to me not to be real books. And then you can have zines. And by zines, I mean generally the small magazines, which are, well, the small booklets, which are um, stapled together, usually A5 in size, and probably have up to about 40 pages. People like Cafe Royale are probably the most well-known exponents of it in the UK. And they have a massive range of projects that they've done as zines. For me, I wish I'd taken up the idea of zines many, many years ago. But Craig Atkinson at Cafe Royal um, got to that idea first. He's conquered it, and there seems to be no need for anyone else to really get involved. The the basis of much of Craig's work has been small projects done by photographers, documentary projects generally, um, projects that are probably not sufficient in content for a book, but work within 36 to 40 pages. So they're important, and they bring work which might not otherwise be seen to public attention. And then you have traditional offset printed books, and that's what we do. All our books are offset print, and that means they're printed on rather large machines. Um, they tend to be quite expensive to produce, but they're what you would recognize as the standard of the traditional printed photo book. And then finally, you have handmade books. And I think these are important because often photographers may have a project which is good, but possibly doesn't have a very large audience. And therefore, putting together the project in a handmade book is a sense of completion. It's a way of moving on to your next body of work. And I think it can be very significant for photographers to work in this way. And of course, handmade books, if you develop particular skills of binding and the rest, allow you to use a range of special materials in a way that we as more commercial publishers can't. So you can make very special objects. And I would always suggest that photographers look at making their own handmade book. So you've decided you want to make a book. How do you go ahead with it? Do you self-publish or do you find a publisher? Well, finding a publisher is not easy, but equally self-publishing isn't easy. And I'll talk about that shortly. But what are publishers looking for? Um, to be honest, I'm not sure I really know what I'm looking for until I see it. But what I have to say is what I'm looking for is something that connects humanity really across borders, across countries. So I'm looking for something which is as valid in the States as it is in France, as it is in the UK. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be a very local subject. And one of the examples that I always quote is Paddy Summerfield, Mother and Father. Paddy's book is about his parents aging, his mother developing dementia, and it's almost all photographed in the back garden of his parents' house in Oxford. There's a small interlude in the middle where they go on holiday to a bungalow in um, Harlech in mid Wales. But the majority of the book is photographed in a small space. So very local. There's nothing international about the subject matter or about the location. But the subject matter is universal. The the problem of, or not the problem, but the process of aging. And the process of aging from the perspective of a child might be. So you can look at something very local, you can look at something in your back garden, but you've got to find what it is that makes it of interest to people. And it's finding something which, as again, I talk about humanity. It registers with people, even if they don't speak the same language as you, even if they live in uh, different surroundings, different countries. And when you see it, you know it, but it's quite hard to find. And then there is the whole thing of time scales. I often get approached by a photographer who will say, I have an exhibition at a particular gallery in 3 months' time. Well, 3 months' time is nothing in the world of publishing. By the time we've gone through the process of editing, the process of design, and the process of printing, it's pretty hard to do anything in less than 6 to 9 months. And ideally, you need a little longer than that because the process is a collaborative one. And it is, unless you're doing it yourself as a self publisher, but if you're working with a publisher, it should be collaborative. And it should be a process of going backwards and forwards to each other, um, making adjustments, making minor changes, sitting with a project or a dummy for a while, and then going back to it a week later, 2 weeks later, and giving it a fresh view. So don't never race it, never try and rush it through. And the other thing to say about timescales is a lot of people will come to me with a project which is, say, the anniversary of something. Um, can't think of immediate examples, but say, for example, it's an anniversary of the abolition of slavery, and that's coming up in, a year's time. Well, that's fine. It's got the time to produce and to work on the project. But as a smaller publisher, I have to be very aware that because something is a major anniversary, centenary, whatever it is, then there are lots of other publishers who will be looking at doing something to recognize that particular event. So I am immediately putting myself in competition with very big publishers who have stronger distribution, um, who can produce larger numbers of any book. So I'm making life very difficult for myself doing it like that. So how to submit work? Again, I'll come on to that shortly. But firstly, the book dummy, because people don't always understand what a publisher is looking for. I'm not looking for a photographer who will say to me, I have 5,000 images on a subject. Do you want to have a look and see if there's a book in there for you? And I do have photographers who say that to me. What I want is the photographer to do a first edit. I may not agree with the edit when I see it, but if I ask the photographer to do the edit, then what I'm hoping to get is not a perfect book, but I'm hoping to get a starting point for me to understand what the photographer is trying to say in the book. You can give me, 200 pictures. I can put them together. I can edit them. I can put them together in a sequence without any major difficulty. But the way I sequence it will be to tell the story I want to tell, not the story that the photographer wants to tell. So the book dummy is important in that it's the presentation of what you understand the work to be about. It's your ideas of the book, and it's important that it is sequenced. So, talking about self-publishing or publishing, what does a publisher do? Well, there are some people who think that we receive books from finished projects from photographers and just get them printed and put them in the shops. If only it was as simple. The process is really involves just about everything you can imagine. So it starts from working with the photographer on the edit. So it's very much the editing process, getting the sequence right, putting together a book that actually says something. It's worth saying that I'm not interested in the best of. I'm not interested in a book which shows the best of a photographer's work. What I want is a book that says something, where the photographer has something to say, not necessarily about a particular issue, but has a perspective. There is a reason for doing it. And again, it is about, for me to understand it, I need to see it as a sequence. Once we've gone through that editing stage, then we've got to think about what's the way to present it. So the format of the book, hardback, softback, page size, type of paper, all those sort of things. The design. I design probably 95% of our books. Not every publisher does, but I take the process through from start to finish. And the design, as I said before, is a collaborative process. So it's backwards and forwards with the photographer, getting to agreement, being patient, standing up for particular positions, both that's from the photographer's perspective and from mine, and being as honest with each other as we possibly can be. So once we get to that stage where we've got the edit, we've got the design, then we've got to decide where we're going to print, who we're going to print with. We've got to look at print dates, when we're going to get the book out for. And that means negotiation with the printer. It also means understanding the printing process. And that's complex, knowing about reproduction, knowing about how the print process actually works. Having printed the book, we then have to market it. So we have to know something about how to get the book out to a public, how to encourage people to be interested in the book, to get press, to get media as far as possible. We also have to know about the world of shipping. How do you get stock sent around the world to bookshops, to individuals? So you need to understand that. And then, of course, you had to understand finance. So there are a lot of skills involved. You don't have to be a total expert at all of them, but you have to be prepared to work in all of them. And so you have to ask yourself, if you're thinking about self-publishing, can you do it yourself? Can you really do it yourself? It may be that you've got friends that can help. You may have a designer that you know. You may have experience in some areas, but think about the whole process and work it out step by step and decide whether you can really do that job. So you've decided you can't self-publish, so you're going to try and find a publisher. Um, Starting point is to go into bookshop, look at magazines, find who the publishers are. Then find out what do they publish. There's certain types of work they publish. Um, you know us as photography publishers, photo book publishers. But despite that, we still have authors who send us novels, poets who send us poetry, people who send us non-fiction books about subjects that are irrelevant to us. So it's a waste of their time, it's a waste of our time. So do check and find out what people publish. Then find out where do they sell. Do they sell just in the UK? Are they selling abroad? Um, are they selling on the internet? Are they selling through shops? Find out as much as you can about the publisher. Find out what type of books do they produce. I mentioned Craig Atkinson from Cafe Royal. He doesn't do hardback books. He just does his zines. So if you're going to him, then you know what type of book he's going to produce. And then finally, how do they want to be approached? So, how do you approach the publisher? Cold calling won't get you very far. And by cold calling, I mean uh, phoning up, knocking at our door, turning up at our stand at a book fair. None of those are really going to make anything happen. Um, we'll try and be as pleasant and as polite as we can be, but depending on what we're doing at the time, you might get a fairly brusque response. I hope not, but it happens. So, how do you get attention? Well, one of the things I would say to every photographer is if you found publishers who you think are right for your work, then start sending them material. Um, they're, yeah, I'm quite happy to see uh, announcements of exhibitions that a photographer's involved in. Get those emails. I I may not, or a new website that the photographer's set up. I may have a quick look, I may not, but after a bit, I start to get to recognize that photographer's name, and then I'm likely to look a bit more. I mean, for example, if you get something in a feature in a magazine, there's no reason not to write to me, send me an email and tell me about it. I will probably have a look. It probably won't lead to anything immediately, but your name and your style of work will lodge in my brain. Most publishers will have some sort of policy about accepting work. So check out the publisher, check out what they say about submissions, and follow that as closely as possible. But one of the best ways of really getting attention is probably portfolio reviews. There aren't so many in the UK these days. I mentioned Photo Meet before. That's a good opportunity where you will show your work to gallerists, to publishers, to magazine editors, etc. And it can be the start of a relationship. There are quite a few books that we've published as a result of first seeing the work at portfolio reviews. So I would look at them. The problem is they have become quite expensive to go to in recent years. And so be quite picky about the ones you go to. Um, do your research. Make sure that you prepare yourself for the review and just make sure that you're ready for it. And again, we mentioned this before, I mentioned this before, sequenced work. Some photographers want to send us designed work. So they'll send us a book dummy which has been designed by a third party designer. Now, they can look amazing. If if it's a design I like, yes, it can add to my response to the work. But if it's a design that I dislike, if I find the design is wrong for the work, it could put me off the work totally. And so I would always suggest just send something which is sequenced. And this goes also, this is why it's here, but it also refers to portfolio reviews. When you do a portfolio review, sequence the work that you're going to present and understand your sequence and practice being able to run through it and present it clearly to whoever is reviewing your work. Now, a bit about the business, really. So most print runs are no more than 1,000, 1,500 copies. And that's of books that I think are going to do reasonably well. Um, Often these days, printing, this is offset printing I'm talking about here. Often a printing of 500 or less copies is quite usual these days. It's very hard to print less than 500 copies using offset. If the number is less than that, you really need to be looking at digital printing. Certainly, if you go below 350, 400 copies, it's going to be impossible on offset. And all of that means that because, I mean, when I started printing, print runs were 2,000, 3,000 copies. And we have printed, well, up to 10,000 copies of books. Those days are long gone. And as those numbers come down, it means that the unit price of printing, the cost per copy, is much higher. And it's very, very hard to be able to produce books at a cost which is commercially viable. And that means that external funding is increasingly critical. So just a quick run through of, sorry, let's just move this over if I can. Um, a quick run through of some of the costs involved in producing the book. So design, obviously, editorial. By that I mean, if you have an essay in the book, if you want someone to write for you, then you're normally going to have to pay unless you've got a friend who's a well-known writer or a good journalist, etc. Um, if you're going to write something yourself, make sure you get it very thoroughly reviewed by um, external sources, friends you trust, but friends who won't just tell you it's good. And if you're writing something yourself, Don't put any hostages to fortune. Never talk about how important or good your work is. Always stick to facts, um, understate rather than overstate. That's certainly in terms of anything you personally write. But I'd also say if you get a text written by a critic or whatever, again, you should look at it and you should edit it with that critic, and you should avoid again these hostages of fortune, saying anything that overstates how strong your work is. You've then got the cost of repro. Obviously, a lot can be done on your own computer these days, but conversion to four color, because all printing is in CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. You may want to do duotone if you're printing black and white images, or you may want tritone in black and white images. And again, you have to convert into those profiles. Quite complicated. Your printer might be able to help you, but otherwise, read up as much as you can. There's a lot on the internet. Talk to other people who might know more about repro than you do. And then printing, try and find out all you can about the printing process so you can understand it as much as possible. Repro is a high cost. Printing is a very high cost. You would think that if printers use the same equipment, and many of them do across Europe, across the world, Heidelberg presses, Komori presses, KBA presses, you would think that if one printer used the same press as another, they would be as good. They're not. Printing is a real craft, and so make sure that when you're selecting a printer, find one whose work you've seen, whose work you know, and whose work you admire. It is a very high cost. Binding, again, increasingly expensive. And then I always think it's worth going on press. I go on press for just about every book we do. And I do so because I always believe we can get just a little bit more from being on press. The guys on press know their machines. You should rely on them a lot for their advice. But small tweaks, small adjustments on press are best done with you there. And that's because when you're on press, you're probably printing, if you're on a large press, up to 16 pages to view. That means on one side of a sheet of paper, there will be 16 pages of your book being printed all at the same time in lines. So there will always be compromises. And if the press guys are on, they make the compromises. If you're on, you make the compromises and you decide which are the most important images that you want perfect and which are the ones where there can be a little movement. If you're not there, it's the press guys who do that. So I'll just do this very quickly, and this is just to give you a guide on production costs. So I've got this in the way now. Let's see if I can get rid of this. No, don't seem to be able to get rid of it. Let's go back. Oops. Right, so yeah, sorry, this pie chart. The yellow is the production cost. This is the cost. the sort of budget you'll be involved in with a book. Um, I think it's all pretty clear, but the majority of it is the actual print and binding cost, the 70%. Now, this is the horror one. So this is the breakdown of um, income. And as you'll see, an average of about 49 to 50% uh, of the total retail price goes as discount to the bookshops. 14% is then roughly the distributor charges. 22% is about what we can spend on the production, which gives us, as publisher, about 10% to cover our costs and make a profit, and about 5% of the retail price as a royalty for the photographer. Though royalties are often given as books rather than cash. So it's very marginal. You know, we the retail price of a book needs to be close to 5 times the production cost for it to be a viable project for us to do. Once it gets over 25, 26%, we run a real risk of losing money on it. So, in the other costs that we have as publishers, marketing, any book launch, distributing press copies, warehousing, which is a cost, distribution, which is the shipping side. So even if production costs are met, if a photographer or an organization covers all the print and binding costs and design costs for us, we still have costs. And I would say on average, it's £3,000 to £4,000 per book. And these are for all the other incidentals that we end up involved in. So we always have to fund the gap. You have to find a way to fund that gap. But there's also a gap if we look at the possible market for a book. There are many books where we think they're important to do, but if we can only produce 500 of them, we're not going to be able to get our production costs to a level where we will actually make any profit on any book at all. So the only way you can fund it is crowdsourcing or advanced sales, or personal investment. I would say avoid personal investment unless you're extremely wealthy, or if you're at the stage of life where you're as old as I am, for example, and you've been working as a photographer for so many years, and you want to leave something for posterity. Now, if you have the funds, then perhaps at that point it might be worth doing something. But otherwise, I would always look at crowdsourcing, Kickstarter, etc., or another way of getting advanced sales. Now, every photographer I've ever met wants a book, but I sometimes think that's the wrong thing to do. Um, for example, if books, the books we're producing these days are averaging between 10, 11,000 and £18,000. It's very expensive. And if you've got to raise some of that money, or if you're putting any of that money in personally, then it may be good to look at the alternatives. Lots of photographers in their early years are trying to get a book. Now, it takes time as well as money. And sometimes I think those photographers would be better building their bodies of work. They might be better trying to get their work exhibited. So they get the experience of those areas before they put all their energy and resources into trying to get the book. But also, does it need to be a book? Why not think about different things? There are many photographers who've done newspapers, for example, tabloid type newspaper publications, considerably less cheap, less expensive. Um, if they're linked to a particular issue, particular event, say you've got an exhibition, they can be a great way to distribute your work. Quality is not as high, but if the images are strong, it can still be useful. Another alternative, you're thinking of a book, but realistically, the market might only be 100 to 150 copies. Why not think about doing something in a box? You can buy lots of very nice cloth bound boxes for £3, £4. You can then print images. You can print a sheet of text. You can put them all together in a box. You can use particular materials. You can make it quite special. You can add ribbons. You can add all sorts of things. And you can make something which looks good, has the possibility to sell, and pulls your work together. I always think that it's important to start with the work. What's the work most appropriate for? What sort of format? And then research possibilities. Do go and talk to people in bookshops. Um, Talk to people in galleries. See what they think about your work, about how it might uh, reach its audience. Because ultimately, it is about the audience. And we can't ever forget that audience. There are books that I've certainly done where I got very excited about the project. I ignored the potential audience and we struggled to sell the books. So, there is no point in doing a book that only 10, 20 people want. If you're doing a book, it's got to get out to reasonable numbers. And we could talk about marketing, but I'll just go through it very advertising. We don't do advertising. It really doesn't work in terms of photo books. Too expensive for the return involved. We seek editorial coverage. So we're always trying to get coverage in magazines, newspapers, regional papers, your local paper. Any coverage is useful. For example, your local newspaper. You never know who is actually reading it. So get it out there. Exhibitions, even small exhibitions, are good ways of getting the work out. Exhibitions in libraries, exhibitions in theatres, art centres, anything to allow you to push press coverage. And then, of course, the book launch. The only thing I'd say about a book launch is don't expect anyone other than friends and family to buy books. And even then, many of them will not. Don't expect the press to come. The press very rarely go to book launches unless you're an extremely well-known photographer. And of course, book launches cost money. You've got to hire the venue. and you've got to usually pay for some drink. So if you're going to do a book launch, treat it as a celebration, as a marking of a particular event. Don't see it as a commercial viable proposition. It's going to cost you money. And then finally, if you're working with a publisher, then what I would say, photography involvement is absolutely key. And I don't mean it just in terms of the editing process or design process. I mean, once the book is out, sometimes there are photographers who, once the book is out, think their job is done. But it is your job to work with the photographer, with the publisher, and try and help get as much coverage as possible. Talk to anyone you can about your book. Try and push your book and try and help make it a success. I'm going to skip this, but if you're doing a Kickstarter campaign, you will need a book trailer. Right, so it's back to the basic questions. So it's why, what, and how. So why do you want to do a book? What do you want to do? And how are you going to do it? And you've got to keep going back to those questions. Ask yourself time and time again, because if you haven't got serious, good answers to all of them, you shouldn't go ahead with a book. Now, I'm going to finish by remembering Martin, who I worked with for over 40 years. I first met him in the 1970s and very briefly, and then got to know him in the mid 1980s. And Small World, the one here, is the very first book um, that I did together as an independent publisher with Martin. But I did books with him, many books at Corner House, and this as well, The Last Resort. Now, The Last Resort was the book that made Martin, in the sense that it got him recognition. He self-published it in 1986 under the imprint Promenade Press. He got funding from the Arts Council, something which they sadly don't do now for publications or photo books anyway. And he managed to set up distribution with Phaidon and got the book out there, got a lot of attention, both in the UK, a lot of controversy around it as well. But then he got attention in France, and that was the starting point for building his European and then international reputation. Now, the original Last Resort, as I say, was published 40 years ago. And so we're now doing a special book with the Martin Parr Foundation, tied in with an exhibition that's being held at the foundation starting on Friday. And this includes a background history on how the Last Resort book happened, written by the archivist at the foundation. There's a text by Peter Braun, who was the original designer of the book, and also a short text by Susie Parr, Martin's wife. And it's a very interesting book. Also, there are some images from Last Resort in the book. So that's just coming out next week. It will be available at the Foundation's exhibition, as I say, starting on Friday. but available from our website from, well, in fact, with orders now, shipping next week. So that's really me for now, and I'll now just let this run with some selected titles in the background, and I'll be happy to take any questions from people.
Thank you very much, Dewi. All right. So there's a few questions, and if
Mhm.
you've got any more, please bash them into the chat box. That would be great. Um, there's a couple of questions. There's a short version and there's a longer version that I typed in. But it's really, you said a blurb book doesn't feel like a real book.
Mhm.
Why is that? What is it about that kind of book versus a proper book?
Well, I'm probably biased in that the majority of books that we do are hardbacks. We don't do
Mhm.
many paperbacks. Now, there are various reasons for that. One is that I like the feel of hardbacks. They feel as though they're going to have longevity, that they're going to be around in 100 years' time, etc. Um, Paperbacks can look good, but paperbacks in shops particularly can suffer quite badly. So, if you've got a display copy of a paperback, it's going to get bashed.
Mhm.
A display copy of a hardback will last considerably better. So there are commercial and practical reasons as well as reasons of uh, choice.
Mhm. Right.
But the
Uh,
Blurb book for me, I mean, you can get hardbacks for Blurb, but they they never feel quite the same as I don't know. It's partly the binding because generally they're not section sewn. Section sewn is where generally sections, groups of 8 or 16 pages are, um, those are sections, and then they're all sewn together. So if you look at the book, if you look at any of our books, you'll see stitching um, rather than glue. And lots of the Blur books are just glued.
yeah, that so-called perfect binding, which is very imperfect.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Um, Great question here. You talked about handmade books and making boxes of prints. This is from David Hinney. It says, both of which I've considered. Have you any thoughts about how to get these in front of potential buyers?
Nothing is easy. It's not easy for us. Um, I think the starting point would always be, if you're doing a box, for example, then um, you would you we've used a company called Tiny Box, the Tiny Box Company, I think it's called, and they have quite a range of boxes, different sizes. So you can buy one. Always more expensive to buy one than 10, but you buy one and you can put together a test because if you're digitally printing, then you can be doing single copies of the images. So you can put it all together as a sample and then you go and show people. That really is the only way. And of course, you can photograph it and you can put it on the website and you can put it on, you can advertise it through Facebook, etc. But the starting point is you have to make one to show people what it looks like. And it's exactly the same with a handmade book. You have to make it first, photograph it, show it to people, and then you may decide that you can make another 10 or you can make another 50, but you have to make the one first.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got a question here from Matthew. When submitting a sequence of images, should you include all the works that you want in the book? And
Yes.
would 50 images be too many?
I would say, well, uh, no, 50 is certainly not too many. Um, I'm always asked about how many photographs should be in a book, and I would say, um, you know, there it's like saying how many words should be in a novel.
Yeah.
There's some novels are 160, 180 pages, some are 800. Now, if the 800 page novel is worth those 800 pages, then that's the right length.
Mm.
If the 180 page novel isn't worth those 180 pages, it's the wrong length. So it's determined by your work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's determined by also by the fact that you have to realize um, you have to show things to people. You have to get people's response. Is it too much? Is it becoming boring? Is it becoming repetitive? So, you need to ask people whose views you respect.
And another question from Mike. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this one, but what is your all-time favorite photo book and why is it so?
Uh, my photo books are like my children. Therefore, I'm not allowed to have favorites. Um,
Yes.
Yes.
Let
I
me
mean,
twist that question.
there are ones that I'm particularly fond of for various reasons. Uh, Last Resort is
Mm,
one that I love for all sorts of reasons. Um, the books like Love on the Left Bank, Ed van der Elsken. Um, Now that was it. I always really loved the work of Ed van der Elsken, and it's one of those where I thought, oh, for me, he was very well known because he was always seen as a master of 20th century photography. So I thought he was well known by people. And we did a facsimile reprint, and we did the first one in, I think it was 1999, we brought it out. Um, I think I did 2,000 copies because you could print 2,000 copies in those days. And it took just about 10 years to sell those copies, a very long time. And
yeah.
this is someone who I thought was one of the very major names in international photography. Um, the interesting thing about it was that probably at least a third of those books sold in the last 6 to 7 months of the 10-year period. And we therefore did a reprint, and that reprint sold out in about 10 to 12 months. So we did another reprint, and we're still reprinting. We've just done a reprint now um, in September, October last year. So, so I'm very keen on that book, but I wouldn't say there are favorites.
Mhm. Yeah. Quite interesting there. So that got to at least a third reprint already. It's quite interesting that the limited runs that you do. I do see sometimes that there have been reprints. I mean, an example, I was just rummaging through my cupboard, and Paul Hart's Fenland trilogy, for example, which you
Mhm.
published. There's several. Well, I think there's two volumes of that have been reprinted a couple of times, but there's the one.
Reprinted once.
Sorry, yeah, okay, reprinted once, yes. And it's quite interesting. This the value of the books effectively rockets. The farmed edition, the one I don't have, looking
Yeah.
for that.
Uh-huh.
5 times its retail price is about
Oh,
the
yeah.
cheapest you can find it on eBay.
Yeah.
It's quite something.
Well, they are produced in small numbers.
Mhm,
Um, yeah, it's we do now hold on to a few copies of most books, so that when they are out of print, we can sell them at a higher price.
mhm.
Yeah, but a straightforward commercial approach to that.
Obviously, yeah, supply and demand.
And that's because in the early years, probably the first 10 years of me publishing independently, we didn't do that. Um, and I remember talking to Martin Parr. Martin would say, well, you should always keep a box. And I say, oh, no, we just, we'll sell them. And Martin, of course, was right. Um, so there's what we discovered. I mean, books like uh, William Klein's New York that we did in 1996, I think, um, sold out. And initially, we had no copies left at all. And the book, which I can't remember what we sold at originally, perhaps 40 or 50 pounds, was expensive, but that was selling for £300-400 within 6 months of us going out of print. So we'd just about made a profit, not a large profit on it. Um, but if we kept 100 copies back, we would have made far more money than selling about three or 4,000.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Live
Yeah.
and learn.
Yeah.
Got a question here from Joe. He's really asking, have you ever got books into libraries throughout the world? Now, okay, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah. We have. It's far more difficult now.
Mhm,
Um, that like we used to get a lot into when I started in Corner House when we would get quite a few books into libraries. But libraries don't really stock much in the way of photo books now, and they have very few budgets. The universities are not good at, they don't have much in the way of budgets either. So no, it's quite hard getting into libraries now.
right.
Um, one of the things that happens automatically is that we are supposed to send copies to the copyright libraries, certainly to the British Library,
Hmm.
and then there are other copyright libraries, the Bodleian, um, you know, National Museum of Wales, etc., National Library of Wales. So those copies will go, but that's at our cost.
Hmm.
Libraries aren't buying.
That's like the quid pro quo for getting an ISBN, I think, isn't it? So, yeah, once you've got an actual book ISBN number, you have to then send them off to the library.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, one thing that I'm looking at, and I may launch at some point, is I've been trying to find a way to get books to libraries. And so one of the things I'm considering at the moment is running a Kickstarter where what we would effectively do is um, uh, essentially the idea is for us to give libraries free copies of books. Um, 10 copy, a selected number of books, 10 books per library. And we'd limit the number that we're taking, but we'll take it from stock that we've got. Um, so it would be to provide 10 copies, say to, a college library somewhere at no cost to them. But of course, there's a significant cost to us of the shipping and the rest. Um, we're willing to effectively give away a number of books to get them into libraries, but we can't cover the cost of the shipping and the packing materials and all of that. So what I'm thinking about at the moment is a Kickstarter where we would ask people to be supporting by something like £20, which would cover the cost then of us giving these books to various colleges and libraries around the country. So it's at a very early stage of thinking through all the elements. But it would be a strange Kickstarter because anyone who donated wouldn't get a reward.
Yeah.
The only reward they're getting is a sense of feeling they're doing a good job by
Halo.
helping
Yeah.
getting books to the libraries.
Altruistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it at the moment. I'm just been desperately trying to find ways that colleges could get more books in.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because often I'll see a book list from um, a university or a college with a photography course, and I look at their book list, and they're listing books that were published 15, 20 years ago because they're the
Mhm.
stock they've got in their library. You know, their
Uh,
reading list is very out of date.
mhm.
So has crowdfunding really made a difference? Has it impacted the ability to get more photographers' work published?
It's certainly helping. I mean, we've not done many. Um, we're just doing one at the moment. Um, I've got yeah, just one at the moment, which is Catching the Tide, Colin McPherson,
Hmm.
and that's a project that Colin's been working on for over 30 years, and it's about the very popular subject of salmon net fishing in Scotland. So, obviously there would be thousands of people who would want that book. Um, so no, it's a really important project. Um, but doing that as a commercial book is quite difficult.
Hmm.
So um, it needs the support of a Kickstarter,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's a very important uh, documentary record because it's an industry, traditional industry or traditional form of work in Scotland, which has not totally disappeared, but is very close to disappearing. And Colin has recorded it for over 30 years. So it's an important record. And I'd be very sad if this didn't come into book form.
So all the questions from the list there. If anybody's
Yeah.
got anything question-wise, and if it's quicker to speak than to type, please, feel free to voice your question.
I think your overall questions, the why, is very, very important.
Yeah.
I mean, I practice as a business analyst and used to do why, what, how, when, and where.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they were all, yeah, the important W's. And people say, well, how come the how has got a W in it? So yeah, it's hugely important understanding that overall desire to do something. What's the rationale for it?
exactly. It's
Yeah.
books are expensive,
Hmm.
and as I say, they're very time consuming as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, working, even if you've got the body of work, even if you've got the 200 images that you want to edit down to 50 or so, it's
Hmm.
very time consuming. Then working out the edit, then working out the design,
Yeah.
the whole process,
Hmm.
very, very time consuming. And
Yeah.
if you're doing it just to um, as a piece of self-congratulation with no sense of an audience, then you have to realize you're doing it.
Mm.
I'm not saying that it's wrong doing that,
Hmm.
but don't persuade yourself there's an audience out there.
No.
It's kind of be harsh on yourself.
Mhm.
When it, I mean, a great example is we had a submission from a photographer many years ago, and it was uh, it was girls just going into puberty. And so there was an analysis of the market for this. And so the notional market, and as a business analyst, you will love this one.
Yeah.
Market was any girls who were going through that that age, their mothers, um, any women who'd ever gone through puberty, uh, the fathers of those girls who'd gone through puberty. So, when you added, I mean, I'm not doing it exactly as she did, but if you added it all up, there was no one on the planet who was not in the market. Yeah.
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 So
Exactly.
your market
Everyone was
segment
touched.
was everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that clearly is nonsense.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is, don't fool yourself into
No.
thinking that. I mean, one of the interesting things is at book launches. I was talking about family and friends, etc. It's really interesting the number of book launches I've been at where friends, family, no, even family as well, family and friends. I'll be there with the book selling it on behalf of the photographer or someone else will be, and the the family member or the friends will be saying to me, "Oh, well, I'll get it at the end because I don't want to be carrying it round with me."
Yeah.
And I see them walking out of the event without a book,
Hmm.
but they've spent so long saying they're going to buy it and they're going
Yeah.
to buy it. So family and friends will say, "Oh, you must have a book." But family and friends won't always put their hands in the pocket for that £35
Yeah.
to buy a copy of the book.
Hmm.
You've got to be very realistic about
Yeah.
who will actually buy it.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, Eamon McCabe was one of my tutors at uni, and he put me in touch with Eddie Ephraim's
Oh yeah,
black and white photography magazine
yeah.
to produce a book for an exhibition that I had, solo exhibition. And that was an education in itself. It was about 12 months working with Eddie, going through prototyping
Yeah.
and selecting papers and the printing method and whatever. And I was 12 months too late
Hmm.
because the exhibition lasted 8 months, and that I
Yeah.
should have actually had that book prepared before the exhibition opened. And
Hmm.
it was supposed to be a limited edition print run
Hmm.
as an add-on, but it was a huge lesson, um, and very, very expensive as well,
Yeah.
to actually understand what was involved, um, with all the other components, as you've illustrated tonight in your talk, the various steps you have to go through, and all the other craftsmen and craftswomen involved in the process. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are. Um, you can work with. We do a lot of work, say, with in terms of sales reps. Our sales reps are self-employed. We're not employing them direct.
Hmm.
Um, so they're doing a lot of our selling. But if you're an individual, you've actually got to go round those shops.
Yeah.
The sales reps and the distributors, the sort of trade people, um, don't want to take on a self-publisher who's got one book produced in a quantity of 500 copies. There's no profit for them.
Hmm.
There's just a lot of hassle. So if you self-publish, you're going to be really doing an awful lot more than even we have to do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the underestimation of the actual outlay is incredible, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
an eye opener when you actually get, especially for a small run as well.
yeah, no, it's very
Yeah,
expensive for
yeah,
a small
yeah,
one.
yeah.
I mean, I would say as a guide, a rough guide for us is that we get probably, depends on the market, but round about a third of the retail price back. Now, there are lots of photographers who talk about self-publishing and they're going to do a book, it's going to be £30 and they're going to do 500. And they immediately multiply 500 by £30. So, if we're getting a third back, we're getting £5,000. And if you're trying to produce 500 books for £500, it's not going to be a very impressive book.
No.
So, this is the difficulty about the economics of it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
certainly I wouldn't, if um, I wouldn't recommend anyone starting out in publishing now, put
no.
it like that.
But I learned another harsh lesson at uni as well. We had an assignment, what was produced a photo book. I've actually got three versions of the same book here. There's the handmade and hand bound by a paper conservator
Yeah.
book. Right, I did all the printing.
Hmm.
There's the blurb book,
Yeah.
and then there's the just in case the paper conservator didn't get the project out in time. There's the
Uh-huh.
ring. Which one got the highest mark?
The ring binder.
The ring
The
binder,
five the
probably.
£5 ring binder.
Yeah.
Um, and I can understand why as well. But it was an interesting lesson. The difference in price: £40, £200.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
um,
one of the things I was talking about try and think differently. So, for example, there's no why can't you do a book which is ring bound like that?
yeah,
Now you can work with so many of the digital printers online, and lots of them will do a wiro bound, and that if you design it properly, if you think about the cover, if you think about
mhm,
the um, and actually you can add on things as well personally when you've got the copies, but you can get something produced which is not as expensive as hardback, uh, is in many ways a lot better than a a perfect bound book,
mhm,
um, and is different. And as I say, you can then personalize it. So,
mhm,
for example, you could get something printed digitally. You can then get labels. You can get a stamp, so you can do some embossing or something on the cover, and so you can play with things like that,
mhm.
and make them more individual. Just to,
Yeah, but it's something as cheap as that little, artist book.
yeah.
I found was the sequencing and it wasn't particularly expensive to work it to print them all out. But you mentioned it earlier on that a, someone coming to you and having worked out the sequence for the
Hmm.
actual book, it may not necessarily be your judgment, but
Right.
it's certainly. I know when I've gone through the process myself, I've sequenced the content for a book, and then I've laid them on benches at university and asked three other tutors and said, "Well, can you sequence it?" And each one comes up with a different sequence.
A different sequence, of course, yeah.
Yeah,
No, but I
yeah,
think for me the point is, as I said, it's the photographer's book.
mhm,
Give me the 50 photos
yeah,
And I'll tell a story. If I'm feeling depressed that day, I'll make your
Yeah.
party book
Mhm.
turn from something joyful into something miserable.
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty convinced I can do it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think also photographers have been told too many times that they're the worst editors. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're worst possible editors of their own work. I don't believe that's true. I don't think that they're necessarily the best
Mhm.
because they don't spend all their time editing work. But I do think, it is important that they try. Um, I then will challenge it. I will then say, oh, no, why have you got that photo in? And sometimes it will be, well, I liked it because it was like, oh, it was my Martin Parr photo. Or it was I really enjoyed that day. So sometimes they put photos in because of external factors. Um, so I do think it is important that they put it together so I get a sense of what they're thinking about.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things I often say to photographers is when you're thinking about sequence, um, there, there's a tendency to think, well, what's going to be the first image? I would usually say, what's going to be the last image?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you want? What's the feeling, the sense you
Mhm.
want people to be left with?
Yeah.
So immediately you then start to know where you're going and how you've got to get a route to get there.
Yeah.
So
I think it's
yeah,
very important. It's a very important point. It's
mm,
the last impression.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so have we got any more questions, Sean?
No,
Um,
there's a few remarks, thanks from people, and a few comments along those sort of lines, and lots of people thanking you for really good input and inspiration on how they can move forward on projects. That's good.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's
yeah.
good.
So
It's always
thank you once
strange. It's
again.
always strange doing these though, because you're just not talking to an audience.
Well,
It's different,
although
very different.
I know it's difficult. We did have 53 people on the call though, so
Yeah.
which was good.
No, it's just a sense of
Um,
when you're in a room, you're actually talking to people, and
Yeah, and you see
uh,
faces.
you have a
yeah.
sense of the of well, feedback. And you can
I,
tell
I
jokes in a way that
always,
you
yeah,
can't.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I always get the sense you're speaking to one person when you're doing this medium.
Yeah.
You have an audience of one,
Yeah.
regardless of how many people are on the call. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but really
Oh, it's
appreciate your
good.
time and input.
hmm
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's enjoyable.
Uh, oh, there's someone here saying I've worked on a zine where we moved the staples and then hand stitched the zines to make them a little more personal and a little more handmade.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
You can. That's a process called Singer sewn. The old Singer sewing machines.
oh
You
yes,
can,
yeah, yeah.
you can still get it done at some binders, at some printers, where
Mhm.
they'll do that stitching, and it does make it. Yeah, it lifts it
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well,
Excellent.
Rand, there's still remarkable testament to the interest level is that there's still, of the original 53, there's still 28 people here. So
Mhm.
thank you very
Yeah,
much, everyone,
Good.
for
yeah.
staying on board. I really just make a couple of announcements about things that are coming up. So our next sort of in conversation is with Leanne Alwage, and that's on the 18th of March. And very important, we'll have a short little business AGM meeting on the 23rd of March. So it'd be great if people can come along to that and participate and help with basically running the group.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. And thank you, Dewi.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.